All right, my English teacher friends. So I have another writing workshop for us today that features an Oscar-nominated short that I use to help solidify for my students how to construct the introductory paragraphs for FRQ1 and FRQ2 from the AP Lit and Composition exam. So a little caveat to that is I do use these exercises for my on-level juniors and seniors as well when we're learning how to do literary analysis. So if we're doing poetry, short story analysis, I use these for them as well. So they're very interchangeable. It's not just specifically to the domain of AP Lit and Comp. So this film is called Snack Attack. You can find it free on YouTube. It's about 5 minutes, if that, and it's quite a poignant piece. So I've been asked a few times how I structure this. And where I'm at now in terms of the academic year is this. At the time of recording this, it's the latter end, middle of October. So I've had my students for a little over a month. And early in the academic year, when I'm first introducing this, what I would do is this. I would choose a film that I would Bob Ross my examples on. And I'll slip to the next slide here so that you understand what I mean. And so I would choose film A, and then I would write 3 introductions, 1, 2, 3. And I would explain to the students how to manipulate my template of the inverted thesis. And that's what I mean by Bob Rossing my instruction, Bob Rossing your instruction. Get to the canvas, get to the proverbial easel, and quote unquote paint with your students. Show them how to do this. So I'm going to go over my templates in just a second. And my students come, October 15th, know intuitively, instinctually that, hey, we're doing literary analysis. We have to invert the thesis. So what I'm still doing this early in the academic year is I'll choose a film that they can't write about. So for the purposes of this, I chose a film called Post-it. And I do have that in the YouTube channel as well. So I wrote about Post-it. My students are going to write about Snack Attack. So in terms of helping them with their reads, we do Fishbowl, Socratic seminars, Harkness discussions, Plato's Plato discussions to help students ascertain the meaning of the film because their reads are still a little wobbly this early in the year. I've only had them 5-6 weeks. So they need help in terms of answering the questions, what is the authorial intent and how does the author construct meaning? So collectively, we're going literary terms hunting, like we're looking for the salient, the most pertinent literary terms and features in the film together. As we progress throughout the academic year, all training wheels, all scaffolds off. Kids got to do this blind. No discussions, no modeling, nothing. So, but we're early still. So we're all early in the game. So that's what I mean by Bob Rossing your instructions. So these ones here that we're going to take a look at are written by my students based on how I modeled it from the film Post-it, if that makes sense. So the first question we got to ask ourselves is this: how do I construct the introductory paragraph? And for those of you that are familiar with my work, you know that I always have 2 answers to that question. You can either declare the thesis or invert the thesis. Here's the kicker, for simplicity's sake, especially early in the academic year, just to really demystify the writing process for students, I tell them, hey, it's literary analysis, invert the thesis. Now, those of you that do Lang or rhetorical analysis, argument persuasion with your on-level or your Lang students know that for rhetorical analysis, I always tell my students, declare the thesis. So go poke around in the YouTube channel if you want to see the difference between the declarative and the inverted and why I have a preference for one over the other contingent upon the expository mode. And then for argument, persuasion, synthesis, research, it's a 50-50 coin flip between declare and invert. It's really contingent upon the prompt and the angle in which the argument is going. So, but that's in other videos and for another time. So for our purposes, we're doing literary analysis, so we're going to invert. Well, let's qualify what this all means. Here's the kicker, all right, a dirty little cheat code, a hack, if you will, with regards to the AP Literature and the AP Lang exam. For FRQ2 for the Lang exam, the same rule applies for the rhetorical analysis. Implicit in the prompt for FRQ1, FRQ2, AP Lit exam are the following two questions. Implicit in FRQ2 for the language exam are these following two questions. What is the authorial intent, and how does the author construct meaning? So regardless of the language of the prompt, these two questions are being asked of our students. In the introductory space, if they can correctly ascertain the meaning of the piece, whether it's the poem or the shorter passage, FRQ2, if they can accurately read it and ascertain its meaning while diving into these two questions, out of the gate, they're going to come out with blazing speed and definitely have the thesis point. So what is the authorial intent, and how does the author construct meaning? Well, let's talk about how we're going to do that. I'm going to go right to the inverted. What my students do is they take 3 sentences answering the question, what is the authorial intent? The last sentence is, how does the author construct meaning? And that's the thesis. When you get to the construction of meaning, it's the thesis. So that's why we're calling it an inverted thesis. So you end with the thesis. When you declare, you start with the thesis. But here's what happens. When kids declare, typically in literary analysis, I find that they switch expository modes and they break the demand of the assignment. When they declare, they oftentimes get very plot summative, and they therefore switch modes and do plot analysis instead of literary analysis. So you can declare a thesis for literary analysis, but just for simplicity's sake, early in the academic year, I'm going to stick to just the inverted. So it's 3 sentences, what is the authorial intent? 1 sentence, construction of meaning. So end with the thesis. You're going to sprinkle in a little bit of context and background, because as you're talking about authorial intent, some teachers call it universal theme, universal truth, exigence, the author's thesis. However you want to talk about that or cloak that language, you're going to sprinkle in a little bit of context and background that's thematically rooted. You're also going to sprinkle in a little bit of tier 2 level vocabulary. And again, those that are familiar with my work know that I run something called the Word Study Academy from day 1 of instruction with my students, regardless of class, regardless of grade level. There's a vocabulary void going on in America. And in order to fill that void, I do intensive word study. In order for this to sound academic, which it's an academic task, students need to have a modicum of tier 2 level vocabulary in their introduction and throughout the rest of their paper. And by tier 2, I simply mean your average run-of-the-mill SAT level caliber word. The other thing that I want them to focus on, so that they have all of it going, voice, rhythm, flow, for the purposes of nailing that sophistication point, is they have to manipulate their sentence constructs. I run something with my students and in my National Writing Project classes called the Nuance Academy. And I borrowed an idea, concept from Strunk and White and their seminal text called Write It Right. And in Write It Right, they make the assertion that there's 12 different ways to cobble together a single sentence. So there's 12 different ways to write a single sentence. So you're going to see my students this early in the academic year doing a little bit of flexing of their muscles with regards to their syntactical manipulation. To get the voice, the rhythm, the flow, students really need to break away from writing independent clause, short, simple declarative, short, simple declarative, short, they have that chop, chop, chop rhythm that we see a lot of in College Board anchor papers. And then the big kicker, it's going to be 4 sentences long. No more, no less, 4 sentences. So let's go back 2 slides. 3 sentences, what is the authorial intent? 1 sentence, how does the author construct meaning? So let's see what my students are doing here and see if they're holding any water using this template. So you start with the authorial intent. Speaking in generalities, the boomers are often overly self-righteous in their judgments of teenage social trends. And that's kind of the whole exigence of the piece, right? That's the big aha. That's the exigence. That's what Catalogo is saying in his film. That's why he made this film. All too often, however, the things being judged and scorned are deeply entrenched character flaws of the one doing the judging. But of greater importance, these judgments and preconceived notions tend to be off basis once a human connection is made. So we're 3 sentences in, and you can see that it's all authorial intent. Why did the director, why did the author make that film? What was his purpose? What was his points? What was his truth, right? So 3 sentences of that. You don't plot summarize at all. You just focus on a heavy thematic concentration. The 4th sentence, hit me with the construction of meaning. Andrew Catalogo highlights the irony of such situations hyperbolically in a short film entitled Snack Attack. So through our Socratic seminar, my students and I all agreed, you really got, to get to the main gist of this film, you got to focus on the fact of all the situational irony and the hyperbolic expression of it. So you don't want to do a literary terms dumping ground in the construction of meaning. You focus on the 2 to 3 most salient terms that are germane to the piece, germane to the film. So we went irony and hyperbole, and again, you can contest that and go with in other directions, but that's all my students have learned so far this year. So I know there's other bit terms and devices in the film that you could roll with. So depending on where your students are at, that by all means tackle it. So 3 + 1, note the vocab, like self-righteous. You have scorned, entrenched, preconceived, highlights is nice. Hyperbolically, good words, good vocab. Note the sentence constructs. Nothing's running parallel, right? So lots of good syntactical manipulation, syntactical variants for that voice rhythm and flow. And I think out of the gate, any AP reader would say, yeah, this kid's got the thesis point, but also subjectively, I think an AP reader would say, I think this kid's probably going to get the sophistication point if they can sustain this throughout the rest of this essay. So it's off to a blazing good start. So here's student number 2. I'm going to do the same thing. What is the authorial intent? How does the author construct meaning? 3 + 1, have some tier 2, focus on those sentence constructs. It has been said that a person's judgments about another person say more about their own character than the character of the person who's the recipient of the proverbial finger pointing. It's very good. Again, exigence, universal truth, universal theme. This is often displayed in cross-generational interactions whereby the older generation allows their preconceived notions to draw erroneous conclusions about the teen being drawn into question. Oftentimes, older people take a whole karmic inventory of a kid without any grounding basis whatsoever. So we're 3 sentences in. Perfect. Authorial intent. Very thorough coverage of the authorial intent. Last sentence, construction of meaning. Andrew Catalogo hyperbolically illustrates this irony through the ugly nature of such judgments. Very good. You got your lit terms down there, and you're solid. That's the thesis. So that's why we call this an inverted, because you're ending the lit terms basically announce the thesis. Because you're doing literary analysis, you have to make a literary argument for literary analysis. So that's why I have them do that. Student number 3. Very quick, concise, to the point writer, but look how they manipulate the template. The rifts that separate one generation from the next are typically generated by preconceived notions that are rooted in stereotypical thinking. And again, that's the ha-ha, that's the eureka that you come to after watching this film. It goes both ways. The old shame the young, while the young malign the old. But as is often the case, it's when a person takes these assumptive reads of an individual too far that things can go off course. All right, so we're all authorial intent, last sentence construction of meaning. Andrew Catalogo depicts this through situational irony and hyperbole. end with your terms. You can do that all day long. So my students really like doing these films. It's quick writes. It doesn't take all block to do this, especially once you practice it enough. And you can really hone in on how to craft the introductions for FRQ1 and FRQ2, or if you have on-level students, how to do literary analysis across the genres. So great exercise to learn how to house those introductory paragraphs. So very cool. And then in YouTube, you just type in Oscar-nominated shorts or award-winning short films. Hundreds of them. They're wonderful. There's a lot of really good ones in there. So let me wrap up here. A lot of people have asked me about my professional development opportunities, and I think rumor got around that I got picked up by the National Writing Project. So all of my professional development opportunities are going to be sanctioned by the National Writing Project, which is fantastic news for those that need professional development hours. All of my courses come with completion badges for professional development, and one such course, folks' favorite course is the Teach It Right 5-week mastermind. And what we do is meet Sunday evenings for 5 consecutive weeks, and we go from 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we go over all of this. My templates from start to finish. We do my alternative grading methods, my Word Study Academy, Nuance Academy, Plato's Plato discussion modality, you name it. We do the whole kit and caboodle as far as that goes. And the kicker with that is National Writing Project awards a 10-hour completion badge, even though it's a 5-hour course. So they incentivize it a little bit. For those that can't free up the time, there is a self-paced course that's offered. And then for those that just want to do little mini-series courses, we have my alternative grading method course. It's going to be a 2-hour intensive. We're going to offer that in the coming weeks. We have my teaching line of reasoning 2-hour intensive coming up in a few weeks as well. So I'm staying busy with the National Writing Project as well as NCTE. As many of you know, Tim Freitas of Garden of English fame and Brandon Abden and I will be presenting in California in November. So that's cool. And then I also am doing some free webinars through Perfection Learning in the coming weeks and months as well. So hopefully all is well in the world of ELA, and happy teaching, happy writing for now.